which I think can move us to the next kind of difficult place. Is a lot of us carry shame. A lot of us, we don't understand a good difference between guilt and shame. Or even, and I know that this is not a popular term with my friends who are big fans of Brene Brown, but we're not good at distinguishing between bad shame and good shame. And when it runs from, hey, into the bad shame, and it runs from you could do these things better, or what happened, right? So we're talking about behaviors. Our brain can jump to self-protection because we go from not about what happened to what does this mean about me? And if you think about this, like my son is 13 and he is just getting into hats in the last year, and he wears a lot of my hats. And one of the things that he does with my hats is the color of his hat has to match the rest of his outfit. And he gets that from me. That was a lot of my life, and I still try to do that somewhat regularly. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that the hat that I'm wearing matches my hoodie. But he won't wear a hat that doesn't match. Not because he actually cares, because like there's a long time in his life where he didn't care about matching, but what will people think about me? In other words, what does this say about me? And a lot of times our defensiveness to critique and or accountability can be not because the thing that we did or the thing that we are participating in is about critiquing or holding accountable our behaviors. It's more about what does this say about me? What are people going to think about me? And what that does is it creates self-protection in our nervous system. Our brain just goes, bam, now I need to defend myself. Now I need to protect myself. Now I need to kind of cloister and be defensive. And what happens is it's very difficult to feel that and for it not to come out of our body, either in our mouth and our words or our body language. There was one time I worked at a restaurant, I was waiting tables, and I had been chosen by the shift manager to be the serving manager for the night. So I had to go around before anybody could leave. I had to make sure that they did their side work. So at the end of a person's shift, they have to refill the sugars, refill the condiments, etc. And there was one guy there who had been there much longer than me, and he was known for not refilling his sugars. So I said, hey, did you refill your sugars? He said, yes. I went and looked, and he hadn't. So I said, hey, you got to go back and do that. Well, he lost his mind. He just went, he actually threw things. It was wild. But really what happened was, what I realized now looking back was it was more, he was throwing a temper tantrum and he wanted to go do something, but he kept saying, are you saying I can't do my job? And I'm like, no, actually, I think you're a really good server. You just don't think much about your teammates and you leave them with empty sugar caddies that they then have to refill in the middle of a rush. And he got really mad. He was defensive, though. It wasn't that he was mad. There was something else going on inside of him because that anger, remember, again, longtime listeners, anger is a secondary emotion. And as that secondary emotion erupted, it becomes this spinning cycle because now we're mad, now we're reacting with mad. And what happens is that whole, like, what does this say about me keeps spinning, and it just keeps feeding the defensiveness. And that's where we get into trouble with accountability because now you're attacking me. Which leads kind of to the next thing is a lot of people, you know, when I was putting the show notes together, I was wondering, should I say some people or should I say a lot of people? And I have to be honest with you, as a therapist, I think a lot of people were taught that love is conditional. If affection was withdrawn from people when mistakes were made as a child, and I know a lot of people that were this way, growing up, if they made a mistake, love was withdrawn. What happens to them when you say, hey, you're making a mistake right now? They might worry that you're going to abandon them. Or this might be you. If you grew up in a home where you felt like your parents loved you or your caretakers loved you when you exceeded or did well, and they withdrew love because their behaviors changed, maybe they were violent, maybe they were loud, maybe they were screamers, maybe they used words to attack you. What happened was they would lean into that, maybe because they're worried about how you're going to turn out, but now you've turned out, you're the adult, and now you're hearing accountability, you're hearing critique, and you're worried, is this person going to abandon me? And here's the thing that makes this one, man, it just makes it so insidious, is this idea that it happens faster than most of us think consciously. It happens faster than consciousness. And so immediately your brain goes to, oh, these people are going to abandon me. I'll be honest with you, when my wife and I were first together, in fact, we had a fight 2 weeks before we were married, maybe not even 2 weeks, maybe a week. And I remember it was a huge fight. Like we were standing outside our townhouse that we were renting. We were moving in. Her brother said something. He and I got into a fight. Then her and I got into a fight. And we're standing outside. And I said to her, are we still going to get married? And she's like, why wouldn't we get married? I'm just really mad at you right now. But my nervous system, faster than consciousness, said, oops, she's mad at me. She might not want to marry me. That's a perfect example of this. And it happens, I think, for a lot of people. I think all of these first three kind of lead to this fourth one, which is, if you've ever heard the term emotional fusion, when there's emotional fusion, the person can feel that they're trapped or that there's going to be some sort of unsafe separation because of this accountability. Because accountability can be like, hey, no, you can't participate in this with me until this is done. Or however that works, you can't go here until that happens. And especially with people that we're incredibly vulnerable to. I see this a lot in counseling. The emotional fusion of people. So when the wife criticizes something the husband's doing, now that is different than criticizing him. And that can get messed up both ways. I think sometimes people think they're criticizing what a person is doing. And I think that's when accountability, they can, let me back up here. I think sometimes a person can think they're criticizing what their spouse is doing. And in reality, they're criticizing them with the words they're doing. Instead of saying, you did this, and we need to talk about it, they say, you are this. And so they can do that, and it runs the other way too. I think that really is an attack. When you say to your spouse, you are this, rather than you did this, that's an attack. The flip side of that is they might say, hey, you did this, and we need to talk about it. And the person listening, they interpret that to, you are this. And that's emotional fusion. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Emotional fusion typically involves the other person. Suffice it to say that emotional fusion is the inability to have your own totally developed emotional self. So what happens is when they criticize you, you feel distress, and that distress feels like an emergency. And this is important to understand, because what happens is a lot of times that defensiveness, the person that is offering the legitimate critique and or accountability can feel like it's arrogance on the other person's part, or they can feel like there's meanness there. And sometimes there is, right? We have to figure that out. But a lot of times when there isn't, we can still feel that because we have an emotional fusion that creates this unsafe feeling. And it's a nervous system response. It's a nervous defensiveness. It's a fear response. It's not really arrogance. Blame shifting or minimizing or counterattacking will usually show up in this case because it's a defense mechanism, not because they actually are trying to attack you, even though they are. I get that, and it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Sometimes they just want to attack the other person. They just want to go on the affront. But a lot of times what happens is their body is kicked into defensiveness. There's fear inside of them, and they're just trying to protect themselves.